This is Tara Lynn Groth. I miss seeing everyone at open mics and writing groups and writing conferences, and I wanted to shed a little light on what I've been working on recently, which is getting back into a rhythm of submitting to literary journals and presses. And to do that, I figured I would do kind of an old trick that I know a lot of other writers use, and that's looking at the contributor bios in a literary journal. So I came across a literary journal that I felt like aligned with the type of writing that I do, both fiction and poetry. And I pulled up all their contributor bios, and I was really surprised after I went through everything. And just to give you an idea, there's about 25 to 30 lines on a page in my journal, and I just started handwriting journal names as I saw them in different writers' bios. And I filled 3 columns on about 2.5 pages, and that's what I just did for about an hour and a half, is just going through all the bios and writing down unique literary journal and press names. And then when I have time set aside for journal submissions, I just start going through the list, and I'll Google the journal and check out their submission guidelines. And right now, the filter process that I'm using for whether or not I will submit to a journal or a press is that I'm looking for their deadline first. And if it's something that I recently missed, I will still enter the journal on a spreadsheet that I have, and I'll just organize it by when their submission's next open. So that way I don't have to look for them again or bookmark anything. It's just listed in my Excel for tracking. The other thing I look for is if they have a submission fee. And in the past, I have just paid submission fees, and year after year, I really don't realize until the end of the year when it's time to do taxes that it really adds up. And I've decided, kind of going forward for the time being, I'm going to target journals that do not have a submission fee, with some exceptions. There are some contests that I want to enter, and there are some journals that have nominal submission fees to cover their costs. So I am, doing a few of those. Then I decide what I'm going to submit. And some journals will accept multiple submissions. They'll say you can send in 3 to 5 poems. Other journals, require you to send 1 at a time. So as always, I follow the submission guidelines, and I generally will try to do the max of whatever they allow. Just, if you're thinking of, if it's a numbers game and you're just trying to get, some exposure for some poems or for some stories. And then after I, decide how many I'm sending in, then part of the Excel sheet that I maintain, I'll have, which stories are already submitted to other journals. And my strategy is that I always have each of my stories being considered somewhere, at some journal, at some press, or in a contest. And it's a little bit more challenging with poetry because I do have a lot of poems, so I can't be as proactive with making sure each of the poems that I've written are under consideration in the same way. So when it comes to poetry, I look at the poems that I feel like would be the best fit for the specific journal. And then I check to see if I've already sent it somewhere else, so that way I still am making sure that I'm just submitting to one place at a time. My next step then is waiting to hear back from the different markets. When I hear back from a market, I will open my spreadsheet, and then I will make a note if the piece was accepted or declined. And if it was declined, I have a little practice where I will then take that story or poem and I make sure I immediately send it to another market. So it's always under consideration somewhere. And then if their submission period is still open, the market that declined the story or poem, I send them something else. So that way I have something under consideration with each of those markets at any time. So it really becomes almost like a pyramid scheme, and you've got, each market, whenever the submissions are open, is always considering your work in some way, and then you have your stories out under consideration anywhere possible. The other piece that I track is if something has been declined maybe 3 or 4 times, then that's like a sign to me that either if it's not the right market, does the story need to be reworked, or does the poem need to be revised? So it'll just kind of flag me to take a closer look at the work before I start sending it out again. Considering all of the journals that I have found just by looking in one literary journal, the contributor bios, I will definitely be busy for a while in the coming months. I'm interested if you have certain methods for approaching literary journal submissions and sending your poems out for consideration and contests. Maybe there's something I could change about how I'm approaching this that could help me submit faster or in a smarter way. I'd love to learn about it, so please comment below. And you can check out my website, which is taralynngroth.com. That's linked below. If you'd like updates on creative writing, publishing, and freelancing, you can check out my blog, which is writenaked.net. Thanks for watching.